Every man has his secret sorrows which the world knows not. I want you to think about the last time someone smiled at you. Did you feel safe, or did you feel watched? Manipulation never begins with force. It begins with warmth, charm, and the illusion of safety. That is why it slips under your skin before you notice. The disturbing truth is simple. The most dangerous people rarely raise their voice. They raise questions in your mind without you realizing. Psychologists call it covert influence. It is the ability to bend your choices without touching them. A study once showed compliance rising over 300% from a single subtle trick. Not a threat. Not even a demand. Just careful timing of words, tone, and body language. You see, manipulation is not magic. It is structure. It is built like a trap that looks harmless until you step inside. Most people believe they can spot a manipulator right away. They think of obvious liars or aggressive narcissists. But the reality is colder. The best manipulators smile with you. They nod, they listen, they mirror. And by the time you feel comfortable, the net has already closed. This is why you must learn to see the signs. Your survival in conversations, in relationships, even in business depends on it. Imagine losing years of your life because you trusted the wrong hand. Imagine waking one day and realizing none of your choices were yours. That is not exaggeration. That is the outcome of subtle psychological control. And it can happen to anyone who believes they are immune. So the question is this. How do you tell when someone's interest in you is a mask? What if their kindness is only a calculated move? Tonight, I am going to pull back the curtain. I will show you the hidden markers that give manipulators away. Not the obvious ones. The quiet ones. The ones that slip into your brain unnoticed. Once you see them, you cannot unsee them. But first, let me take you into a story. One evening, a man walked into a crowded room. He looked ordinary. No threat. No weapon. Yet by the end of that night, almost everyone had done what he wanted. And not one of them knew why. That is where our journey begins. The man who entered that room was not rich. He was not powerful. He did not carry status that drew attention. Yet within minutes, eyes followed him. It was not what he said. It was how he moved. Every gesture was deliberate. Every pause seemed natural, but it was planned. He understood the psychology of presence. Manipulators craft an aura before they ever speak. That aura begins with silence. When silence is held long enough, people lean in. They wait, curious, and curiosity is control. He smiled faintly, just enough to look inviting. Not wide, not forced, but measured. People relaxed. They trusted what they did not understand. This is the first sign of manipulation. Comfort that feels too quick. Trust without history. You think you are meeting a stranger, but they already know your pace. They mirror it back to you. Your laugh, your nod, even your breathing. And suddenly, the man is no longer a stranger. He feels familiar. The brain confuses reflection for connection. It tells you he is like me. But that is the trap. Similarity creates disarmament. You lower your guard. Your suspicion fades. The man in the room knew this well. He mirrored without flaw. When someone crossed their arms, so did he. When someone leaned forward, he matched. And slowly, one by one, they warmed to him. Open loop A begins here. How far can mirroring pull someone? What happens when familiarity is no longer real, but engineered? The answer is unsettling. Because most people never see the strings. They only feel the pull. By the end of that night, people believed they had found a friend. But they had not. They had met a mirror-wearing flesh. And that is the danger. The line between trust and trap is thinner than you think. By the third hour, something shifted. The man was no longer adapting to them. They were adapting to him. This is the silent pivot of power. At first, the manipulator blends. Then, without announcement, he leads. Subtle cues guide the crowd's rhythm. A hand placed on a table, and others mirrored it. A slower breath, and the group unconsciously matched his pace. This is entrainment, the synchronization of human behavior. The brain follows patterns. And when one pattern dominates, the others dissolve. In the room that night, his became the strongest signal. The crowd didn't notice. They only felt comfort, as if harmony had emerged naturally. But harmony was manufactured. And here is where curiosity sharpens. If he could synchronize breath, what else could he synchronize? Emotion, belief, decision. One by one, their defenses thinned. He asked nothing heavy. Small agreements, harmless nods, casual yes moments. Each agreement paved a path. By the time larger questions arrived, their minds were already tilted. This is the psychology of momentum. No one likes to contradict themselves. So if you nod once, you'll nod again. A manipulator counts on this. The consistency bias chains you to your own words. And he was chaining them all. At that moment, he owned more than the room. He owned the frame of reality inside it. Open loop B begins here. If reality itself can be framed by one person, where does your free will end and his control begin? That question lingers. And it never lets go. By the fourth hour, the air was heavy. Silence had become his ally. He spoke less. They spoke more. But every word they uttered was inside his frame. This is the highest tier of manipulation, when the target believes the thoughts are their own. He no longer needed to push. They pulled themselves deeper. One person shared a fear. Another revealed a secret. The atmosphere shifted from casual gathering to confessional. Trust, once a wall, was now an open wound. And he fed on it. Notice the tactic: reciprocal vulnerability. Humans mirror not only gestures, but emotions. When one bleeds, the others cut themselves open too. The manipulator knows this. He sprinkles his own stories, carefully chosen, never too heavy, always calibrated. Each story hooks emotion. Each hook binds loyalty. And then comes the escalation. Once secrets are shared, identity is at stake. To leave the circle would mean leaving a piece of themselves behind. This is commitment escalation. It chains people tighter than fear. A man doesn't abandon what he has confessed. Nor does he question the one who received it. That night, he became more than a presence. He became a keeper. Not of truth, but of leverage. And leverage is the purest currency of control. Open loop C begins here. If one man can harvest your secrets, what happens when he decides to weaponize them? Secrets are not just whispers. They are weapons waiting for hands strong enough to use them. By now, he had gathered plenty. But his true brilliance was not in the taking. It was in the timing. He never revealed everything at once. Instead, he dropped fragments. Hints. A detail here, a reminder there. Just enough to remind them of what he knew. Just enough to keep them unsettled. This was his first micro-payoff. A secret, lightly revealed, gave him proof of power. It silenced those who doubted him. It warned those who considered leaving. It bound the group tighter. Because they realized he was not just listening. He was recording. And if he remembered their weakness, he could expose it at any time. This is how a loop closes. The mystery of why they trusted him now had an answer. It was never about trust. It was about fear disguised as loyalty. And yet, he opened another loop. He hinted at something darker. Something no one had confessed. A secret bigger than the group. One that tied them all together in silence. His words were vague. But their effect was clear. The air grew tight. Eyes avoided one another. Each wondered what the others might be hiding. Paranoia spread like a disease. The circle no longer felt safe. It felt trapped. That was his design. Fear from outside makes people run. Fear from inside makes them stay. And he had mastered both. Fear is not stable. It rises and falls like a tide. A skilled manipulator knows how to keep it rising. He does this through escalation. Not all at once. Never a flood. He delivers fear in steps. Each step just high enough to unsettle. Never high enough to break. The first step is doubt. They begin to question their own memories. He reminds them of past mistakes. He recalls details they had forgotten. Or believed forgotten. It makes them wonder what else he might know. The second step is dependence. When he removes fear, even briefly, he becomes a savior. The relief is addictive. They crave the calm he controls. The third step is isolation. He suggests that others are not trustworthy, that secrets are leaking, that someone is against them. It turns friend against friend. Once suspicion spreads, unity collapses, and he becomes the only stable figure. The fourth step is repetition. He cycles between threat and comfort, fear, then relief, suspicion, then trust. It's a rhythm, like a cruel heartbeat. And over time, they stop resisting. They adapt. Fear becomes the air they breathe, and he becomes the one who decides when they suffocate. Every manipulator knows this truth. Fear is not just a reaction. It is a leash. And the tighter it is pulled, the less people notice the hand holding it. This is how escalation works. Not as a sudden fire, but as a slow burn that leaves nothing untouched. There is always a breaking point. It doesn't come with a scream. It arrives in silence. A face that no longer argues. A voice that no longer questions. That is the peak of manipulation. The moment the will collapses. It is not sudden. It is the sum of every doubt, every silence, every small surrender. And when it comes, the manipulator knows. He can see it in the eyes. No fire left. Only obedience. This is the climax. The victim now believes resistance is impossible. They may even believe submission is survival. That's the cruelest part. The manipulator doesn't just win. He convinces them they chose to lose. He plants the thought that giving in was smart, that it was their idea. It is a trick that destroys the self. Because once you believe submission was your decision, you stop fighting it. And if you stop fighting it, you start defending it. Defending the one who broke you. That is the perfection of control. Not through chains. Not through prisons. But through persuasion so deep that the prison is inside the mind. This is why manipulation is more dangerous than force. Force can be resisted. Manipulation changes resistance into loyalty. The victim protects the very hand that crushed them. And if you've ever wondered why people stay loyal to those who hurt them, this is the answer. At the peak, reality is rewritten. The enemy becomes savior. The cage becomes safety. The leash becomes love. And in that twisted moment, the manipulator doesn't just control their actions. He owns their truth. When the spell finally cracks, it does not shatter at once. It drips. A small doubt seeps through. A word feels wrong. A command feels heavier than before. And the victim notices. It's faint, but it's there. This is the first breath of freedom. It terrifies them. Because freedom means realizing how deep the trap ran. It means facing the shame of believing lies. But shame is the seed of awakening. The manipulator never expects it. He builds his empire on silence, not questions. One question can unravel years of control. Why? Is the most dangerous word to him. Why am I obeying? Why do I feel guilt for wanting out? Why do I defend the one who hurt me? These thoughts spiral. Each one weakens the chains. Reality begins to reassemble. The leash doesn't look like love anymore. The cage doesn't feel like safety anymore. And the enemy begins to look like what they always were. A parasite. This is the resolution. The moment when eyes adjust to light again. It doesn't mean escape is immediate. But it means resistance is possible. And that possibility is power. It is the first true weapon against manipulation. Because awareness kills obedience. You can't unknow the truth once it surfaces. That's why survivors often sound harsh. They are no longer inside the lie. They can see the trap from above. And their voice carries weight because they've walked through fire. Their clarity is the final wound to the manipulator. Not violence. Not revenge. Just truth, spoken out loud. The truth is louder than silence ever was. Every ending hides another beginning. When someone breaks free from a manipulator, the story doesn't close. It bends outward. The pain becomes perspective. The scars become warnings. That's where the cliff transfer lives. Because what happened to one can happen to anyone. And what was learned can shield another. Here is the broader lesson. Manipulation is never just personal. It is cultural. It is political. It is spiritual. It crawls into every space where people long for guidance or love. And it feeds on silence. That is why survivors who speak are dangerous. They expose the blueprint of control. They drag it from the shadows into light. Think of it like contagion. Not just the harm itself, but the cure spreads too. One act of defiance sparks others. One story of survival teaches millions. And that creates fear in those who manipulate. Because once people know the patterns, the tricks lose power. Once you see the strings, the puppet show collapses. This is not about paranoia. It's about vision. To notice when words don't match actions. To feel when flattery is weaponized. To question when guilt is used as a leash. Those skills scale beyond the personal. They protect you in relationships. They protect you at work. They even protect you against voices in society that whisper obedience. That is the cliff transfer. From one dark story into a wider warning. The manipulator is never just out there. They live in systems. They live in groups. They live in any place where people stop questioning. So the lesson is this: never stop asking why. Why this promise? Why this silence? Why this weight on my conscience? The cliff opens now to the next truth. The trap of manipulation is older than you think, and deeper than just personal encounters. It reaches back centuries. It shaped kings, cults, and nations. And it still shapes us now. That's where we go next. The cycle of manipulation has no true end. It only changes form. What once was whispered in the village square is now shouted through glowing screens. What once chained the mind with myths now binds it with data. The tools evolve, but the hunger remains the same. Power over others. Control of choices. The bending of free will into obedience. And so the question returns: how do you stay free in a world designed to pull your strings? The answer is not perfection. No one escapes every trap. The answer is awareness. Awareness cracks the spell. It gives you distance. It slows your response. It allows you to say, wait, this feels wrong. And that pause is everything. Because in that pause, the manipulator loses momentum. They thrive on speed, on emotion, on confusion. But when you pause, you interrupt the pattern. When you pause, you see their hands reaching. And you decide whether to let them touch your mind. That is where freedom begins. Not in avoiding every lie, but in noticing them. Not in avoiding every trap, but in stepping back before it snaps. This is the final resolution. You are not powerless. You are not doomed to be prey. You are the one who decides if their words take root. You are the one who can question, resist, and walk away. And even if you fall once, you rise sharper. Because each scar becomes a map. Each mistake becomes armor. Each encounter teaches you more about the shadows that move among us. So here is the closing truth. Manipulation is ancient, endless, and everywhere. But so is resistance. So is awareness. So is the will to stay awake when others sleep. Carry that with you. Let it sharpen your vision. And remember, those who see the strings can never be made to dance again.